very real. But fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting with danger. Unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio!
Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat. I'm with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other world. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Hello and welcome, everybody. It's always a great honor and a pleasure to be here with you. Another week, another day, and another year. It is just amazing how blessed we are and fortunate. And I just pray all of you, wherever you may be, that you are of good health and well-being, and that life finds you blessed, and that you are receiving the awesomeness that is life, and that we all recognize and show gratitude to the Most High for all the just the abundance of blessings being poured out upon us. And I do pray for all the other people in the world, especially the children, wherever they may be, that they are in an environment where they're being nourished and taken care of and growing up in joy and happiness. These are definitely some challenging times. And I'm joined again by Lisa George. Lisa, are you there?
Hey, Zen. Hi, everybody. It's always a pleasure to do shows with you, Zen. I always learn so much, and to have fellowship with everyone in the chat and those who are listening is just a wonderful opportunity, and I really have a great time.
Yeah, thank you again for your willingness to come on and be with us. And yeah, we have melded into a family. You know, this is definitely a family in Christ, and that we are all gathered to learn and to share and to come to know more about the gospel and the secrets and the riddles that were written down and maintained and shared by the prophets. And certainly we are receiving a lot of the promises that were made to this generation, that the Most High said that he would pour out his spirit upon all flesh in these times and in this age. And we are seeing abundance of all of that happening. It's just so crazy how much is happening in a week, and how many things, especially with the overlap of the spirit and the material. There's a lot of occultic stuff going on, and all of that is in your face now. Do you sense that, and are you seeing that in the world?
Yeah, it's really sad. I mean, we know that this has all been going on for probably a long time, but it seems to be so much more amplified, and they're not afraid to do it, like right straight on the media. And just like in public, I mean, we're seeing so much of the corruption being unveiled. I mean, I'm guessing that when you're referring to keeping the children safe and everything, have you seen it in the news, everything going on with the synagogue in New York, with the tunnels that were connected and the implications from that, and several arrests being made. I mean, I don't believe everything that I read, especially not in the mainstream news, but they do have to show what they're doing in plain sight somehow, right?
Right. But yeah, I did hear a little bit about that story, but if you would, can you elaborate? What were they doing? Well, we know, they have those rituals and meetings and they're doing all these kind of things deep underground, and that's always been the place, where the Masons gather together to do these secret rituals, and that without a doubt they are invoking, conjuring, and dealing with devils and sacrificing the devils as the scriptures have revealed for a
Yeah.
long time.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, when I first read about it and was notified about it, maybe 4 or 5 days ago, it just reminded me of a couple decades ago when all of the evil and corruption was being unveiled about Catholic priests and their involvement with what's going on behind closed doors. And I don't want to say too much, but if everyone's known, but
Yeah.
there's always implications, especially, and I kind of say overall religious leadership of like establishment type of religious centers. I'm sure that there's corruption going on everywhere, but it seems like it's on their timeline when they decide they want to reveal some more. And so now we have rabbis implicated in, and I'm not sure how much what you read in breaking news or mainstream news is falsified, or how if it's 100% accurate or not. I kind of don't trust it too much, but
Right.
just knowing that this is going on, and it was, I believe, in Brooklyn. It was one of the major synagogues that I guess they were saying that they were doing some remodeling. I mean, this is just what I read. They're doing some remodeling, and there was a kind of a riot that broke out with some onlookers, and there was some arrests made of the rioters as they were trying to break through to reveal. And there are some videos you can see online of people walking through this kind of like a maze-like system underneath the synagogue with tunnels. And yeah, I even saw some photos of some like small mattresses with tiny little individual locked type of cage like bedrooms in one of the videos. And again, I don't have a way to verify any of this, but we know the corruption is happening though. And then ironically too, I don't know if you've seen a picture of this, but there is a metal sculpture in that same neighborhood that's been there for decades of it's just like a fake manhole. I don't know if you've seen what I'm talking about. It's like a fake manhole, but there's like a sculpture built into the manhole of this reptilian creature, and it's pulling a small child, like it's trying to pull it into the manhole. So that's just like so bizarre. Yeah, I'll put up a picture in Discord, or I'll send it to you so you can see what I'm talking about. It's
Yeah.
just, I mean, it's right in your face, and this is in that same neighborhood. It's just so creepy to me.
Wow, that is absolutely insane. Because, again, for those that know behind the scenes what's going on with the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, there's a lot of truth to what that is implying. And
Oh yeah.
actually, we'll share some passages which elaborate on this. But wow, and this is in New York.
Yeah, in Brooklyn, I believe. You could probably even do it for those listening to you. You could probably just do a Google search of manhole reptilian statue in Brooklyn, New York, and it'll come up. It's like built right into I think it's meant to be some type of artistic decor or something, but it's built right
Uh-huh.
into you see the bricks around it, and it just looks like a manhole, and then this metal reptilian sculpture reaching out with this like slimy, gross. I mean, to me, I'm saying all these other things, but reaching out with its like arm to pull this small child who's like trying to get away from it. It's just so bizarre how that they would say that this is artwork.
Right. Yeah. And that they, celebrate and they uh, have those kind of things all over their houses. Just really bizarre. But yeah, let me share just a couple of passages because this will lead us into what we're going to go into this evening. We had wanted to follow up on the creation week and to connect what had occurred in the ancient times, where we see how the war in heaven led to the earth becoming destroyed and becoming an indistinguishable ruin. And so, want to cover some of that, but also the connections with the ancient rituals and how it was and why it was that these fallen angels, why they were cast out of the heavens, why they were banished, and also why judgment had been brought upon them for the kind of things that they were doing and involving themselves in. And so, in the scriptures, it tells us about, their involvement with even sacrifice of their own children, and the in that there's been blood rituals, victim sacrifice. Even in Micah chapter 3, it speaks about how they would cannibalize, and that these were the priests and the princes that were high up um, in that they were the ones that were involved because they had, gone astray and uh, taken on the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of the watchers and got involved with these kind of religions and this kind of worship. But I'll get you to comment first and then I'll share this quote.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not sure. I've been praying about other former books that I've read several decades ago, like when I first started to do this research into the deep rabbit hole of what people mean if they say they're a Satanist. What does that all entail? And I remember, I'm not sure if you've heard of this author, Zen, Dr. Rebecca Brown. She came out with a series of books. The first one was He Came to Set the Captives Free. There's one called Prepare for War and Becoming a Vessel of Honor in the Master's Service. She's a medical doctor. When she first graduated from medical school and was working in her first hospital in somewhere she didn't say exactly where, but in the California desert area. She was assigned to this particular hospital, and she kept having some strange feelings. She was a strong believer in the Most High. She kept having some strange feelings about some other doctors, and then as she was getting to know the staff, it was brought to her attention that several of the doctors that she worked with were openly Satanist, and that really bothered her. And she goes very much in depth. In fact, I'm thinking of doing a teaching on this particular book, and I have an extra copy I'd like to send you to, Zen, because it's very, the amount of information that she finds out, especially after one of her patients, it kind of goes into what we talked about as far as being the bride of the serpent in the show or so. One of her patients named Elaine was supposed to be, she actually went through the ritual of being married to Satan. And then a friend had invited her to their church. She went to the church. She became a believer in Yeshua. But then, of course, she had all this demonic stuff going on because of all the satanic rituals that she had to go through in her familial bloodline in order to get to that point. And it was just a miracle she got out. So the cult was after her, trying to kill her. She ended up in the hospital after they had induced like an overdose on her, and miraculously a neighbor brought her to the hospital. And Dr. Rebecca Brown that was her patient. She learned quite a bit from this person telling her what she'd been through. And then even so, in this hospital, because several of the doctors were openly Satanists, they were purposely trying to do things to just eliminate her. And so Dr. Brown prayed, and she just felt led to bring this woman into her home and to cover her with the blood of Yeshua and continually pray over her. And just the book details all of that process and everything she learned about the rituals. And it was a real eye-opener for me to read, just to hear like a firsthand account from someone who'd been through that, similar to that video that you shared with me. this was, it reminded me of this book series that I read. I think I was in my early 20s when I read these, and thought, hey, you know, if the Most High is leading me to get back into that and kind of review all that information I learned back then, I'd love to share it and use it so people can know what to do if they're in that situation, because like
Right.
we're saying, it's getting more and more prevalent. You know, there's more people, I believe, joining into that cult, and to just have people know what they're up against spiritually.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, I have not heard of her or her books, but they sound absolutely interesting. And without a doubt, this is happening more and more. We see people that are definitely openly involved with Satanism. A lot of people, tattooing those kind of affiliations and doing all these piercings and even putting horns in their head. I mean, it's just crazy. But and you had mentioned earlier, just about how the Catholic priests that they were involved, and it reminds me of some of the stories that had come forth, like Senator John DeCamp when he had heard and all these kids that were testifying against high level politicians and industrialists and um, even portions like connected to the White House that people were making accusations. These kids are accusing these individuals of utilizing them as like sex slaves when they were just children, and this all came out and found out the contacts were linked to the Boys and Girls Club there in Omaha. And so this senator went out and ended up representing these kids pro bono. And that was the book that it was the first one to really implicate the Catholic priests and their involvement with these orphanages. And that was the Franklin cover up. And, that also back in the 80s and 90s, there was all those stories of the cover ups of the priests and the things that they were doing, the things that they were involved in. Malachi Martin, he came out with uh, a bunch of books and information talking about, the satanic worship that was going on in the Catholic churches. And we see there's even some underground footage and talking about the levels below what is seen in St. Peter's Basilica with where they do the regular Catholic rituals for the public, but underneath them there's the upside down cross, and supposedly where Peter had been buried, and is right up under where they do all the services above. And so those kind of things have been coming out. An individual named Savali as well, that she did a number of shows with Greg Zemansky, the Arctic Beacon, and he was raised in Italy and had some ties to the Vatican and all that, but he revealed and talked about, and this woman had broken away from her family. She said that she was part of those that trained and brought people up to be, part of the order, part of the establishment. She called it the family. But she ended up disappearing for speaking out. And Arizona Wilder was another one that had those kind of elitist connections. And she was interviewed by David Icke and had brought forth all the information about how she was chosen and selected to be um, with the Pindar, who they call Pindar, which that is it means the penis of the dragon, which he was the one that had the choice and the capacity to mate with um, these women who were called, mother goddesses, and they were part of these elitist bloodlines, and they were selected to bear children for the beast. Um, so all kind of strange stuff, but definitely that kind of thing is happening as well. That, like the Omen movies, there's some real truth to all of that. Um, and I think we're seeing it more and more now. It's more in our faces. And so we'll share some passages which connect this to the ancient times. We'll look at, the destruction of the first world age, the stories of Atlantis, the mythologies, the rule of the dragon lords in those times, to help those of you which may not yet be familiar with this kind of information to, you know, pull it together and to make sense of it, because it is beyond bizarre, and it's one of those things that truth is stranger than fiction. So comment once more, and then I'll move into this.
Okay, yeah, I totally agree. And I feel as we get closer and closer to the tribulation, we're going to see more and more just being revealed in our face.
Yeah.
They're really trying to normalize it, aren't they?
Yes, they really are. And that's what it says also, like when I did the show with Timothy and we were talking about the revealing of the Antichrist, um, that is what Albert Pike says. And, the whole reason for the three world wars, that they want to be able to normalize the worship of Lucifer and to bring the adoration of him out into the open.
Yes,
So,
yeah. Oh, I totally agree. I mean, we see it just like we talked about in some other shows about the statues of Baphomet just like blatantly being placed in certain courthouses. I think that it's in two now, even Arkansas and Iowa, I believe. There's that horrible statue with the two children, just one on each side. I mean, it's just it, you never guess, like, even 20 years ago that something like that would happen. But it should be interesting as it continues on and they continue to promote this agenda and to push it, like you said, the worship of Lucifer and all the different forms that takes.
right. And again, it's more and more in the open. And politicians and people, we see without a doubt the music industry and Hollywood stars, and,
Oh yeah.
their covering of one eye and the triangles and all that, that they are without a doubt, aligning themselves with the beast and the beast system. But all right,
Yes.
so I want to share this passage, and this is a quote from the first book of Adam and Eve, and it talks about it's the angels. They're reminiscent on how the war in heaven had occurred before his creation, and that was the reason why Satan and those that followed him were cast out, and that is also the reason why Satan went after Adam and Eve, uh, is to take revenge, and he didn't know, because he had no idea that you know that these things had taken place. But I'll read this and then we'll move further. It says, "But now, O Adam, we will make known to you what came over us through him before his fall from heaven. He gathered together his hosts and deceived them, promising to give them a great kingdom, a divine nature, and other promises he made them. His hosts believed that his word was true, so they yielded to him and renounced the glory of God. He then sent for us according to the orders in which we were, to come under his command and to accept his vain promise. But we would not, and we did not take his advice. And then after he had fought with God and had dealt forwardly with him, he gathered together his hosts and he made war with us. And if it had not been for God's strength that was with us, we could not have prevailed against him to hurl him from heaven. But when he fell from amongst us, there was great joy in heaven because of his going down from us. For if he had remained in heaven, nothing, not even one angel, would have remained in it. But God, in his mercy, drove him from among us to this dark earth, where he had become darkness itself and a worker of unrighteousness. And he has continued, O Adam, to make war against you until he tricked you and made you come out of the garden to this strange land where all these trials have come to you. And death, which God brought to him, he has also brought to you, O Adam, because you obeyed him and you trespassed against God. And then all the angels rejoiced and praised God and asked him not to destroy Adam this time for his having sought to enter the garden, but to bear with him until the fulfillment of the promise and to help him in this world until he was free from Satan's hand. Comment? Lisa?
Sorry about that. My mic was off.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, I really enjoy that text, that the books of Adam and Eve. They reveal so much. I mean, I had questions always when I was growing up and as pastor's daughter and just feeling like the Bible back and forth, but always wondering what happened after they left the garden. We really don't get anything. I mean, the next thing we get is they had children, and then the very next thing is that Cain is killing Abel. We don't get anything else of all that Adam and Eve went through and all their suicide attempts, and I really appreciate the passage.
Yeah, and it shows you again that these things happened before the creation of Adam, because a lot of people are not able to wrap their mind around that there was this war in heaven, there was this rebellion of the angels, that they transgressed against the Most High even before Adam and Eve did, that there was all this time and all this history and all these occurrences that had taken place, like who knows how many thousands of years or whatever time and space, and what led to, because this was on the second day, this was after the separation of light and darkness. That's where the war occurred. And so for they to be here from the second day to the sixth day before Adam was deceived and they were tempted and they fell, that's a lot of time. That has to be, even if it's just 1,000 years, according to each one of the days, that would be 4,000 years of, history and time.
Wow. I'd never calculated it like that, but that is amazing.
Yeah, and in the Sumerian kings list, when you look at the history that is shared and compiled within those manuscripts, it says that the Anunnaki, they arrived here 432,000 years ago, according to the King's List. Because when you add up all those years, it's 3,600 times 10, which is 432,000 years. So the lots, and then when you look at the world too, and you see all of these megalithic constructions, all of these huge temple pyramidal type structures everywhere, even at the bottoms of the oceans. there's a lot of time, a lot of space, and a lot of events that have occurred leading us to where we are now.
Oh yeah, yeah. I totally agree. It's hard to kind of sort out in my head anyway. When I was researching, several years ago, and all of the evidence about Tartaria came out with all the different buildings, and it seems like you can look at the different structures of the buildings, and like the big, massive ones you see at the bottom of the ocean off the coast of like Japan or Okinawa, compared to some of the other structures you might see like at Machu Picchu, where there's like no mortar, but these massive stones just like perfectly fit together. And then compare it to some of the smaller, but they're still huge, all the buildings, like the ancient buildings in the cities. And it seems like there had to be other civilizations that lived, that used to build like these massive things that, I mean, even our modern day technology can't lift up these stones. I mean, we're taught so horribly in history that, people used to just use like a hammer and a pickaxe to make all these things, but there's no possible way. Like, they had to be huge beings, and it would make sense that, like we talked about in the last show, that there was at least another flood, between Genesis chapter 1:1 and 1:2, and another world destruction that happened in there to make things chaotic, right?
Right, right. And, we see again with the scriptures in Genesis that within the first three verses in the Hebrew, it tells us that, the heavens and the earth, um, they became without form and void, and became or becomes. And so again, the words, and we'll go into this as well, um, the actual Hebrew and what it means, and it's implying that the earth became a wasteland and an indistinguishable ruin, which, again, wasteland and ruin, those things imply that something occurred which led to it becoming destroyed, the earth becoming destroyed. And we see again the verses shortly thereafter that the earth is recreated, and that the humans, the pre-Adamic humans that were made on the earth, they were given instruction to be fruitful, to multiply, and to replenish the earth that had been destroyed. And so, considering these things, one would then really look at the world in a different way. And when you see all of these destroyed, ruinous, megalithic sites, I mean, like Pumapunku, these are massive stone blocks, like 18, 20 tons, that should be near impossible to be moved. And yet, some kind of great cataclysm occurred, which shifted and destroyed these ancient megalithic cities, and it had scattered their foundations and had moved them so much that there's stones miles and miles apart that have been carried away by the waters and the sediment, whatever was pushing it, the flow of all of that had occurred at that time. And so there's lots to consider about the world that then was, as Peter speaks about it.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I just see a question here in the chat, Zen. Maybe you can address this, because I am horrible
Sure.
with the numbers and those large amount, thousands of years the numbers you threw out there. That really blows my mind. But Adrian's got a question. He said, "What is the age that, well, I was talking about? Do the megaliths under the sea belong to Katipo flood or Noah's flood, in your opinion, Zen?"
Oh, great question. And yes, I do believe that the ones that we see on the bottoms of the oceans, like Yonaguni and others, Dwarka, and these cities, like there were those pyramid structures that were found in around Cuba. And I don't know if you know about the story of this individual, but in the story of how those pyramids were found, it was shortly after a storm had passed through near the Caribbean and near the Bahamas. And these sites, which had been buried in the sands were shifted so much that when they went over, they were able to see in the scan the large megalithic dimensions and size of these temple complexes. And so while they were uncovered, they went to go check them out. But this individual who shares the testimony, he speaks about um, diving into this one crystalline pyramid that was, like quartz or whatever. Um, but the entire structure was like a giant crystal, and he swam in it, and he speaks about finding in the interior of that pyramid that this one round crystal that was like an egg, and it has all of these really weird and strange properties. And when this crystal was examined by science and others trying to check it out and confirm his story, um, it without a doubt brought forth that there was more to what had happened and what he was saying, because he was able to get away and to swim out and to escape with this one particular crystal, which had everything, the whole structure of the building was focused upon it, and that they were utilizing this crystal technology back in the ancient times to focus their thoughts in the same way that we use crystals and quartz crystals to send forth, radio waves and television signals, to receive them and to transmit them in broadcasts. And so this is, nothing new that crystals have such capacity. But this individual spoke about the story of finding this ancient temple, and how it was the entire purpose of the building was to focalize the intent and thought of these deities, these particular beings, and whatever it was that they were trying to accomplish and to do. And so I wanted to share. Um, did I answer the question? I want to
Yeah,
make sure.
that was very thorough, Zen. Thank you. And I
Okay,
think
yeah, the catapult. And so yes, it was before our current 6,000 year history. This was before the flood of Noah's day. This was, going back to Genesis 1:1, 1:2, where the earth became without form and void. And just to explain a little bit more, to give you, um, all of you, a little bit more uh, as to the detail of the story, I'm going to share from a manuscript that is called the Scroll of Thothis. And also, I wanted to share a short passage from the Emerald Tablets of Thought, because it tells you in these verses that it was when the blood was offered. So when they were doing these rituals and performing these sacrifices, that this is when um, they were, offering up these blood sacrifices. This is what led them to being destroyed. That the Most High was not happy about what they were doing in ancient times, and because of that, uh, they had judgment brought upon them. And so I'll share these two quick verses from the Emerald Tablets, and then I'll read a longer, more extent version of what is being revealed here, but from a different text. And so it says, "Speak I of ancient Atlantis, speak of the days of the kingdom of shadows, speak of the coming of the children of shadows. Out of the great deep were they called by the wisdom of earthmen, called for the purpose of gaining great power. Far in the past, before Atlantis existed, men there were who delved into darkness. Using dark magic, they called up beings from the great deep below us. Forth came they into this cycle. Formless were they of another vibration, existing unseen by the children of earth men. Only through blood could they have formed being. Only through man could they live in the world. In ages past were they conquered by the masters, driven below to the place whence they came. But some there were who remained hidden in spaces and plains, unknown to man. Lived they in Atlantis as shadows, but at times they appeared among men. A. When the blood was offered, for they came, they to dwell among men. And in the form of man, they amongst us, but only to sight were they as our men. Serpent headed when the glamour was lifted, but appearing to man as men among men, crept they into the councils, and taking forms that were like unto men, they slay by their arts the chiefs of the kingdom, and taking their form, they rule over man. Only by magic could they be discovered. Only by sound could their faces be seen. Sought they from the kingdom of shadows to destroy man and to rule in his place. And without a doubt, this is, in my opinion, what has happened over time. We see that the seed of the serpent, the progeny of the devil, these children of Belial, that they are directly involved with working with these devils and demons. And that not only do they conjure up and engage and interact with magic, black magic, and ritual and ceremony uh, interaction with these particular beings, but that this has been going on for very, very long time. And so long that they were able to take over the bloodline that are and have the divine right to rule, or which Satan uses to control, maintain the power, and the 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 brick pyramid that is below the eye, that is disjointed and separated. It makes, represents the humans which are serving the powers, the principalities, the rulers of darkness.
Right. Right. And also too, along those same lines, in my opinion, and I it's been caught quite numerous times. I think we're going to see more and more of this again as we get toward the revelation. But the rulers and as people call them, the elites or the elite or the ruling class, the famous ones today, which were similar to the famous ones of old, are going to be more and more revealed as being, I guess you could say, shape-shifting, and possibly looking more reptilian without their human qualities. I'm not sure what your opinion is on that, Zen, but it seems like it's pretty probable that they're showing so much in plain sight right now.
Without a doubt. And we have those like Princess Diana that spoke about and revealed and talked about the connections of these bloodlines with these particular beings. And without a doubt, in ancient times, we see the worship of the feathered serpent, the ancient dragons of old, the Anunnaki, those who from the heavens to the earth came, um, which when we look at the next text that I'm going to read from the Scroll of Thothis, and I think I can get through this before we go to break, and we'll elaborate on it when we return. But this manuscript gives us a greater detail on this particular time and what happened as well. And the name of it is the Scroll of Thothis, which the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Scroll of Thothis, that there seems to be connection there and a further revelation as to these particular times, because Thoth declares himself to be one of these Atlantean priest kings, one of those that were part of the powers, the principalities, the rulers of darkness, and the things that they were involved in. And so I'll share this and go ahead,
yeah,
Lisa.
I'm sorry, Zen. I just want to comment. It's so amazing that we actually have these texts available to read. I see so many people in the chat getting excited, especially Brick. And we see you, Brick. This is like Brick's
Yes, we
absolutely
appreciate you, Brick.
favorite. So yes, please go ahead and share, Zen. We're all sitting on the edge of our seat here.
Okay, and again, these are this manuscript is not very well known. It is from the Qumran Bible, which is one of those manuscripts which gives us a lot of information about a lot of things, but because people are not familiar with, and it's so much. I mean, the Qumran Bible is just
Oh
like
yeah,
900 pages. I mean, it's huge.
it's a lot.
All
And
right.
if you guys want to read the Colburn Bible for yourself, go look at sacredwordpublishing.com and go to free resources. There's a
Yes.
link there.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, and again, this information is absolutely mind blowing. All right. Let's get into this. It says, the first land on earth wherein men dwelt was not Kayamu. It was a land out beyond the salt waters. To this land came the immortal spirit in the form of a radiant one from heaven, who had left his more enlightened place to dwell among the beasts in the lower kingdom of sorrow. In some mysterious way, he became incarnated as man. How? We know not. But he founded the race of man. Or, of course, that's what they want us to believe. The whole ancient aliens that they created man, which we know, again, is not the truth, but it is for those that accept the ancient alien theory. It is not as recorded in tales told for the ignorant. None knows in truth the old motherland or where it was. There are tales, but they disagree. The nine bows say it was southward. The learned are not united in thought. Some say towards the west, where the sun now sets, while others say towards the east, where the sun rises. Southward are great mountains and forests, monsters and men covered with hair. Here winds are formed within the earth. They issue forth from a black cavern. It is a place of chaos where water, soil, and air are not separate. The old motherland could not have been there. To the left hand side, there is a great wilderness, the land of Amua. The old motherland could have not given birth to such as these. To the right hand is the wide plain of man-eaters, which stretches out to the far reaches of old Kamu. This was barren cavern in the oldest times. To the north of the wilderness, the land is occupied by deformed men and dwarves, where amid this could have been the fertile pastures and plowlands well watered from the Sky River, where men lived in peaceful content. The old motherland was never there, nor, as some say, in the waters beyond which boil at their extremity. Beyond the wide river, there once was a land graced with all riches needful to men, crowned by many walled Meru. But it was not the land of our birth. Northward, the home of the cool breeze, but beyond the lands which skirt the salt water are the one-eyed peoples and the giants with white hair and eyes. Here the rocks and stones are of the whitest marble, and the trees bear white fruit. Thus, in the whiteness, the eyes of men are blinded in their youth, for even the grass grows white. Before this is the land of Hasugia, a place unproductive and barren where fruit never appears on the trees and crops will not ripen. How could the old motherland lie in this direction? In the old books, it is said that the old motherland was ruled by the Queen of Light, who was supreme above all. The temple tales tell that the lesser gods came to dwell among mortals when the mistress of brightness ruled in Kalathi, that they were sheltered in temples, and priests were appointed to minister to them. It is said that places of instruction were set up within the temples, but few men were taught the inner knowledge. It was rightfully held that it would be a danger to those without wisdom, and it had to be safeguarded. Is this not the tale told in the Book of Beginnings? It is said that Kalathi lay within the borders of Kamu, but could it not have been the land of similar sounding name outward from Pontus beyond God's land? Is it not set up both that they were engulfed in fire and water? In the Book of Beginnings, it is said that the generations passed and a vast amount of knowledge and wisdom was accumulated and preserved in purity. It was the heritage of mankind, but though man had learned to cherish the light of truth and walk wisely with it, nevertheless, then as now, false priesthoods flourished. They pandered to the carnal desires of the underdeveloped and exploited the weaknesses of the ignorant. Their iniquity built up a vast weight of evil in the netherworld, which projected itself into the material of earth, so that the powers which upheld it became unstable. This caused all of the southern part of the old land to sink down into heaving waters. The disaster was brought about through the ascendance of evil, rites which awakened the dead were rife among the carnal minded and the ignorant, while those who remained steadfast on the harder road of spiritual development had fixed their eyes on the light ahead, ignoring the pitfalls at their feet. It was then, even as now, will man ever learn. All right, when we come back from break, we'll pick up the rest of it. But you can see that they got involved in performing rituals which were dark, and that is what caused the fall. In the same way that, it was when the blood was offered, that Thoth speaks about how they took over the councils of men. All right, we'll be right back for a second portion.
Okay.
Hello friends, thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com. Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
Revolution Radio. All right. Thanks for listening while we take that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
All right, welcome back, everybody, for a second hour. I'm your host, Zen Garcia, and I'm joined by Lisa George, and we are covering the world that then was, as is spoken about by Peter, and how the first world age was destroyed by the Katipo, as it speaks about, and that this was a judgment against the fallen angels. And we see in a couple of different places reference to this. Like, for instance, Jeremiah chapter 4, where it speaks about, a time when there was no man, and yet the cities of the wilderness were destroyed, and how the birds of the heaven fled. But it's talking about, in my opinion, because it uses the same verse, the tohu wabohu, as to what led to the earth becoming again without form and void. Lisa?
Yeah, and I have your book here, of course, The Firmament Vaulted Dome of the Earth. If you guys who are listening and in the chat, if you'd like to order this, it's at sacredwordpublishing.com by Zen Garcia. And I'm just looking through your first couple chapters here, Zen. There's quite a few references to what you just read, like before the break, from the Colburn Bible, from the Scroll of Thotis. And there was a couple comments to the chat, actually one in particular that made me remember the book that you had recommended for me to read because of the area of the world that I'm in Hawaii, the book by Churchward about Mu, The Lost Season of Mu. That was all like kind of a part of it, because I remember when I was reading in that book, it mentioned like 50,000 years ago. I mean, these big numbers that I couldn't get my head wrapped around it very well. But is that a part of, in your opinion, what kind of like what you just described from the Colburn Bible, or would Mu have come in a later age, or how do you feel like that works?
Yeah, no, I think that what this is referencing is that going back to the ancient time, to the destruction of the first world age. Because we do see that the story of Atlantis and the destruction of Mu, that it's all said to have occurred in the same way, that, there were lightnings and thunderings and the tsunamis and even the waters that flooded the land. And then at the same time, earthquakes were opened up below so that it swallowed the land and it disappeared in a single night, in a single hour. Much like what it says will happen to Mystery Babylon in the ancient times. I mean, in the latter times, Mystery Babylon, Revelation 17 and 18. And so, yeah, I do think that all of these things are related back to that ancient destruction where the earth became without form and void. And I looked up one time, because at the very beginning of this text, it calls this land Kahemu, which, the word mu is at the very end of it. But I looked up what Kahe means, and I believe it was like waters, the waters of Mu, or, like the land of Mu. But it had to do, again, it reminded me of how Atlantis was swallowed up by the sea. And the scriptures also talk about this in Ezekiel chapter 26. It speaks about a seafaring people that were mighty and had, been dominant in ancient times. And this is also talked about by Plato in Critias and Timaeus when it speaks about the Atlanteans and how they were back then trying to take over and rule over all the people. And I think the other interesting aspect of this particular text is it speaks about the giants, and even the one-eyed Cyclops, and speaks about the north, many-walled Meru, which we know Mount Meru was also uh, a name given to the Rupus Negra, which is the black rock, the antimony lodestone mountain, the magnetic mountain, which sits at the center of the Earth's plane. That's the mountain of the congregation. Um, that all of these things are mentioned within this particular text, and I'll go into the last portion, which speaks about the destruction. But when you read the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, it also covers this in the same way. So I'll read this last part
Yeah.
again.
A
Go
quick
ahead.
comment, Zen, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
so I
no.
don't forget. But when you're talking,
Anytime.
yeah, the word kahe, I you also read that too about the destruction of Kahemu and how you
Yeah.
noted mu is at the end of that. But in Hawaiian, kahe means flowing like water. We even have a beach near our house called Kahe Point Beach, and it's known for its beautiful area to snorkel. It's all surrounded by water. I mean, it's right on with Hawaiian right there.
Oh, really? Ah, well, there you go. How
You
cool.
sure you don't speak Hawaiian, Zen? Because it sounds like
No,
you.
but that is very intriguing, especially when you consider that Hawaii is said to be, the land, the tops of the mountains, which used to make up this particular landmass, this continent, that
Yes,
this was the land that had stretched in that particular area, but now is below the oceans.
right, right. And also too, like when Justin and Joy were here, I was showing them our mountain ranges that we have here. The majority of the mountains on Oahu, anyway, are hollow. It's kind of a well-known thing among the locals. The U.S. military has occupied those for a long time, ever since Hawaii became a state. And also, if you look on the outside, it's very distinct markers that they were buildings at one point. I mean, we do have volcanoes, we do have some evidence, of course, of volcanic action happening here, but as far as the tallest mountains on our island, hands down, they had to be buildings because you don't see mountains that are have like right angles and shaped like a pyramid. You don't see like mountains that look
Uh,
like they had like turrets and things coming off of it at one point for very large people, or, like you said, the fallen angels, the Anunnaki. So at one point, these were massive buildings here on Oahu, in my opinion.
yes, and I believe there's a lot of that. Like even in Bosnia, they have these mountains that were outside of the major cities, but they had no idea that these mountains were actually pyramid complexes that were so old they had been buried,
Right.
by some kind of cataclysm. And that's the same thing for the pyramids, the sets of pyramids which were found in the Crimea, which was the whole purpose and the reason why Russia went to war against the Ukraine, was to steal that and gain access to those ruins and that technology. So there's a lot of, as far as the wars that have occultic leanings and ulterior motives that are connected to things that are not being spoken about. Even just today, I saw a video, a release of the body of Gilgamesh. I don't know if you've seen that, but when they show the tomb of Gilgamesh being discovered, uh, his flesh is still upon his body,
Wow.
And his beard, I mean, it looks like he's sleeping. But it's absolutely amazing. There was another story I remember of some woman that had been found, and she was actually buried. The the coffin was filled up with honey, and that the honey had preserved her in some way, similar to what Gilgamesh um, looked like. I mean, he looked like he was just sleeping. He had red hair. Of course, he was of giant stature. He had this long beard that looked like it had continued to grow even after he had been laying in this tomb. But I mean, it's absolutely mind blowing. And this was the tomb that was discovered, which a week later Iraq was invaded. Um, and then the American military went straight to the museums and took everything.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
yeah,
I saw that. I saw some coverage on that. There's always a reason, right? Like they just
right.
love the US military to do all the dirty work and invade these countries and make up excuses as to why they're actually going in when it's not. And it's unreal. I was just going to ask you a quick question, and I'm sorry, I know you have a reading to do. And
Oh no, you're good. Yeah, go ahead.
no, did they say Gilgamesh was 2/3 fallen angel, 1/3 human? Did I read that somewhere? I think
Yeah,
so. In a way, I was just thinking about the numbers. I'm horrible at numbers, but it would make kind of sense that maybe that was like a formula to create the extremely large giants that we read about and that we hear from, Book of First Enoch and all over the place before the flood. I mean, like First Enoch says that it was like what 3,000 ells, and you look up 3,000
right,
ells and it says 2.1 miles tall, and
right,
so
right,
thinking maybe that was like a formula, because since we know that when the fallen angels descended on Mount Hermon, they were attracted to the daughters of Cain. It wouldn't have
yeah,
been like daughters of Seth initially, especially, and maybe that was kind of a formula to have a larger offspring, maybe instead of having 50-50, to have like 2/3 fallen angels. So that's why another reason why they're attracted to the daughters of Cain, because they already had that in their DNA from Cain. Does that make any sense?
yeah, absolutely. And I think you're spot on with that. And because remember the first 10 generations, which the Watchers were said to have come in the sixth generation during the time of Yared. But I do believe that the fallen angels that had come down in the second day, that they were also involving themselves with the pre-Adamites, and that the pre-Adamites were of larger stature as well, and they lived longer lifespans. The first world age was an age where all of the creatures and all of the even the plants and the trees, everything was of very much larger stature and lived uh, longer lifespans. This was the age of what were called the Titans and the Olympians, and we see even some of these mountains like the Devil's Tower, which I absolutely believe it to be the stump of what was a very ancient tree.
Oh,
Um,
too, hands down. You look at that, it's got like organic looking sides.
yes,
And also, too, I was going to mention, Zen, I know maybe people are getting tired of me talking about Hawaii, but we actually have at least two here on Oahu that you can look up if you text, or not text, if you just do a search and look up Punch Bowl. There's two spots here on Oahu that people claim to be like dead volcanoes, or non-active, but in my opinion they have to be the stumps of large trees. And also, because I've been inside both of them, Punch Bowl is actually, they call it the National Cemetery of the Pacific. The military, the soldiers that are buried in there that were from Pearl Harbor or
uh,
other their families and descendants. They still have burials in there, but the soil is totally different in both of these locations. The other one is Diamond Head. In my opinion, that was another gigantic tree stump at one point. And I've taken students on field trips inside of Diamond Head, which they say it's a huge crater. It kind of looks like it, but if you look at it from the side, look at it different views of photos, you can totally see that it's got to be a giant tree stump. And then the soil on the inside of each of these places is totally different than the soil on the outside. Like it's dark black. It's not rocky, not like you think from like a inactive volcano. There's no evidence that there was ever any volcanoes occurring at either one of these locations. And so, once you know that everything used to be massive and gigantic, then you kind of have new eyes. Like I kind of developed new eyes, being able to see these things even around here in our island.
Yeah, I think that, there's a lot of these ancient tree stumps, these what people call these mesas, these flat top, smooth top mountains, which, have these organic rings and look like they were once organic trees, living beings. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of that. And for people that are not familiar with what we're talking about, No Trees on Flat Earth was a video that had come out a long time ago, which speculated on this.
Yeah,
and it blew everybody's minds when it first came out.
I agree. There's some very good coverage. Unfortunately, with all the censorship, a bunch of the amazing flat Earth related videos have been removed from YouTube. Yeah. But if you go to the other channels like Rumble, where Zen's other channel is going live right now as well, or BitChute. I mean, there's other ones that aren't censored as heavily, and you can find quite a few of the videos that were removed from YouTube. But I agree. I love that video. It really opened my eyes to a lot.
Yes, and at some point I am going to try to upload to some of these other platforms. It's just finding the time. But all right, let me go ahead and read this again, and I'll read the last portion of this text because it really goes into the destruction of this particular, this ancient landmass. It says, and I'm going to read just a small portion that I had read previously. Is it not said of both that they were engulfed in fire and water? In the book of beginnings, it is said, the generations passed and a vast amount of knowledge and wisdom was accumulated and preserved in purity. It was the heritage of mankind, but though man had learned to cherish the light of truth and walk wisely with it, nevertheless, then as now, false priesthoods flourished. They pandered to the carnal desires of the underdeveloped and exploited the weakness of the ignorant. Their iniquity built up a vast weight of evil in the netherworld, which projected itself into the material of earth, so that the powers which upheld it became unstable. This caused all of the southern part of the old land to sink down into heaving waters. The disaster was brought about through the ascendance of evil. Rites which awakened the dead were rife among the carnal-minded and the ignorant, while those who remained steadfast on the harder road of spiritual development had fixed their eyes on the light ahead, ignoring the pitfalls at their feet. It was then, even as now, will man ever learn? This was the aspect of the disaster as written in the book of beginnings. There were openings in the land from which evil vaporous poured forth as a mist, descending upon the people like a mantle. It spread out and covered the whole face of the land. The tongues of the people were stopped, and they became dumb with fear. The ground trembled beneath them, and great tongues of flame shot up. The whole land heaved and rocked like an ocean wave. As it rose and fell, groaned and shook, the fires which strove beneath burst forth to be met with shafts of lightning striking down from heaven. A thick black cloud of smoke filled the land, and men were smothered in dust. As the setting sun rested on the horizon, it could be but dimly seen beneath the cloud as a fiery red ball. And when it had gone, a gray, dense darkness prevailed, lit only by great sheets of lightning. The waters broke heavily over the land, sweeping it clean. The plains and the cities were covered, and new shores formed around the mountains. The waters mounted up until all that moved and lived was covered. The land was submerged. Mountain tops alone remained above the rush of uplifted torrent. Whirlwinds blew and brought cold winds which cleared away the dust and the debris. Mud banks were formed, and a mountain mouth remained open to spew forth vile vapors. During one long, awful night, the doomed land was torn apart and southward sank out of sight forever. A wise man has written, this was not mountain girt Kalathi or age old Ramaku. This was the land out in the green waters where the sun sets, beyond Keftu, near the lands of Henbua. It is then said they came through the marshes and across the wild mountains, beyond the barren places of stone into a new land called Enkeda. Here grew the great life tree known even in the days of our fathers. This is the tree of strange aspect, like unto no other, though in the days of our fathers it was barren and enclosed in flames. Now we know that the life tree grew in Talis, which is towards the lands of Dawn by Pontus. Therefore could not the old motherland have been found hereabouts. Not all was inundated. It is said that men came out of the devastation. Behind them the land sank and the earth shook. Mountains split apart and crumbled. Where once there had been a valley, now stood a mountain. The air was filled with smoke, and hot rocks were hurled down from out of the sky. Men choked in brimstone. Great winds howled like 1,000 unearthly wild dogs. They left all behind them and came across the wild places to the land of refuge. Was not Kaimu once known to some men as the land of refuge? Therefore, the whereabouts of the old motherland is not unknown. It is said that when men came from the old land, The everlasting stars rested where the earth meets heaven, but none knows how many lifetimes have passed since then. Thus, it is not impossible to discover where the old motherland lay. Therefore, there is hope, and men need not despair, for the secret may be rediscovered. When once again the sacred things rest in the old land from whence they came, the days of disturbance will cease, and once again men will live in peace. Men go forth to seek the road. All is not lost to us yet. The scroll of Thothis from the Colburn Bible. Lisa?
That was amazing. It's very, you're right, it's very similar to what is described in the destruction of Mu, and how there's, where it talks about where there was valleys, it became, basically
Right.
caved in. Where it was flat, there was mountains, the land just rose up and down, and it just, hearing texts like this from so long ago, it just makes you really realize how amazing their building skills were compared to what we have today. And how long these ancient structures have lasted, even under the water.
Right.
They're so huge, we think they're mountains. Like, there's pretty good evidence the Rocky Mountains were at one point quite a few ancient buildings there. And for the size of the people or the fallen angels that would have built these massive structures, and then for the whole destruction to happen, I mean, we read in the book of Mu, the lost continent of Mu, of how most likely that was the Canaanites or their ancestors that practiced the same horrible religion that they did, with a lot of child sacrifice and blood consumption. We see very similar things that just repeat themselves throughout history, right?
Right. Yeah, and again, you wonder about just the advancement in the technology. You would think that a people or whoever it was that had created all of these megalithic structures, that they would be wise beyond, their years, or that they would be intelligent, and that they would succeed in getting to a place where there would be, nothing more than peace. But that's not the way of it. It's actually the opposite, that these ancient cultures and civilizations, as wise and smart as we believe them to have been, they were involved in deep evil. That they were involved with, again, the whole theme of the worship of the fallen angels, and the like Gilgamesh, he was seeking to escape death. He didn't want to die. That his people, they were near immortal. They lived very long lifespans. Even the King's List shows that. But they got themselves involved in evil. They allowed themselves to fall away, even in those ancient times, and because of that, judgment was brought against them. And we see again that it's only within the Bible that we get the real story. In like the book of Enoch, where the watchers are judged, their giant children are brought to war against one another. Even the flood was to decimate the 409,000 giants, which were the enemies of the children of Noah. And Japheth and Shem specifically, but that all of these things that we don't know about, that evil is still prevalent and still in control and strategic, and established, that we don't realize that the sons of Cain, the children of Belial, that even as Christ said, that they were the murderers of the prophets from the ancient times, going back to Abel.
Oh, yes, for sure. And there's other similarities I noticed too, that you can follow back in Genesis when it talks about how Cain was the one to build the first city, and you've helped me to realize where that is. Zen
Right.
named his son, named the city after his son, and Zen you really wonderfully lead that over to Tenochtitlan, that there's
Yeah.
Enoch right in there. So not
Right.
not Enoch the good, Enoch the evil, right? And so throughout history, it's interesting too how the knowledge from the fallen angels, that's one of the things that they must have taught Cain how to do, because that's not something that you see as a characteristic of the children of Adam. They're agrarian, they're farmers, they learned how to work the land, they grew their own food, they appreciate, and then the Cain is just totally opposite. Like, they're all about building, they're all about having the proper measures, they're all about putting up fences and control and building these cities. I mean, I think it says Cain built 65 cities in the book of Genesis, and they're all about the control. I mean, it's so similar to what we see today. And then, of course, the evil ones today call themselves Masons. Like, I mean, they're just
Right.
carrying on. And I'm not talking about you, Brick. Their religion. And so they just carried on that tradition along with their religion, as they're all about building and destroying and then rebuilding, but they're not the ones actually doing the work, though. They have like slave
Exactly.
class brought in to
Right.
pay them pennies to build all their structures, and I'm sure nothing has changed since Cain. Like,
Right.
that's just a very common thing I see all throughout history, and even before, during the First World Age. Like, we could see they had those massive megalith structures you described under the ocean, and I think we had a conversation too about Mu and how those gas chambers underneath, the people were just so evil that lived there. The Most High caused that to happen, and so
Right.
he's the one that's in control ultimately of everything and in our world. And so, I mean, just like Sodom and Gomorrah, if it's ultimately evil and it seems like it's almost impossible for man here on earth to get rid of, he'll intervene, right?
Exactly. Yes. And he has numerous times. I mean, we see, after the story of Atlantis and the destruction of Mu, which, again, we do recommend that people check out the book that was put out by James Churchward, um, about the writings of Mu, the motherland of Mu. And it's absolutely fascinating. It goes into such great detail on things that are lost. Even the symbols tell the story of the betrayal, the rebellion of the angels against their creator, and so and that's another reason again why we like to revisit some of these old texts so that we can gain clarity, gain insight on what happened in those times and how they tied together with the world that then was and where we are now, because it tells us that that was the first world age. It was destroyed by the Katabo, um, and that we have the second world age, and that this one will be destroyed by fire. And so, um,
Right. And you're right. Like, to bring clarity, we need the extra biblicals to help clarify these little snippets of like the what we get in the Bible. I mean, it's, to me, it's kind of like cliff notes. It seems like a lot of things were gathered and little things cut out here and there and just kind of like all thrown together. And in order to understand it, I mean, how else are you going to understand Genesis 6 unless you have the book of First Enoch, which
right.
I think more and more people are realizing that is definitely one of the early manuscripts. I mean, it's found all over the place. It's in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It was found in Ethiopia. It's found in very key areas of Earth that seemed like it would have been a location of the lost tribes to migrate, such as the Philippines. There's books. The book of First Enoch is all over the place among those who are believers, and you can do the test. The Messiah is quoted in it like 14 times, so it definitely helps to add clarity to what's going on in the Bible when you just get a little verse in the beginning of the book of Genesis 1 where it says, and the earth was without form and void. Okay, how did that happen?
Right. Yeah, in the same way that we see in Genesis 6, and the sons of God mated with the daughters of man and created a race of giants. What?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like, what did that just say? And how we want more information. And
Yeah.
yet, if you don't look, you only have Jude and Peter in the Gospels that make mention of the fallen ones, and they're going after strange flesh. But then in the book of Enoch, we get so much more detail.
Oh, definitely. I mentioned the Philippines. I'm not sure if you're in talks with Tim Schwab in
Yeah,
who's in the
yeah, we
Philippines.
just
He
finished
mentioned,
it.
yeah, it's great shows, by the way, Zed. I really
Oh,
appreciate you
thanks.
speaking together, and you both have so much knowledge to share. And I remember doing some research and discovering that one of the things that I really want to do the next time we go to the Philippines is to check out this small community called the Askaya tribe. They're located on the island of Bohol, and they have their own little community. They don't school their children outside of their community. They live kind of up in the mountains. They have their own set of rules, I guess you could say, but it's based on the commandments. They have their own language that they write in, looks very similar to Hebrew, and they claim to be descendants of the Levites that they helped to construct Solomon's temple, and they also have their own book in their language of the book of First Enoch. So
Wow.
I'm looking
Really?
forward to hoping to get together with some of them because they live in an area of the island that Noble actually preached at in 2019 when we were there. And I wasn't aware of all this at that time, unfortunately. But the next time I would love to get that, and then Sacred Publishing can publish that, and that would just be
Oh,
another witness.
awesome. Yeah, I wish we had because Tim and I talked about this, how there were two Aramaic renditions of the Book of Enoch that were found with the Dead Sea Scrolls, but those were taken and we were only given, the fragments. They
Right.
always give us the fragments. And so,
Yeah, of course. So yeah, maybe the next time you discuss with him, you can bring that one up because he's got a lot more information than I do right now on that, but I'm still researching it so I can make sure I have all the the ducks in a row by the time we go there, hopefully later this year.
yeah, and I do have his books, and I think his work is really amazing, and a lot of the discernment has been similar, as far as like Eden and the rivers of Eden, and how we talked about how what was shown on the Mercator map was at a time, when the ocean levels were different, and so now we see that a lot of what was the description of Atlantis and Mu and the motherland or the mother culture, that those places are now at the bottoms of the oceans,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so a lot of those ancient sites and megalithic cities and structures are, underwater archaeology is where it's at, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I mean, after I saw their research that they did on the rivers from Eden, it just to me it makes it so much more sense than having them all located in the Middle East. I mean, you can look
Right.
back at Hebrew names too, and they changed it to Tigris and Euphrates when it was supposed to be Hiddekel and Parat, and they really kind of put in their own. When I say they, whoever's controlling the narrative and the manuscripts and the geography, because once you realize too that there was no oceans before Noah's flood. There in the Bible we only have rivers and we have fountains or lakes mentioned but it was to water the whole earth, not just the Middle East. So they
Right.
had to be these massive rivers. I don't know if you've seen their map that they used like and I don't trust NASA, but it's like a photo from NASA where they said, oh, if all the oceans on Earth were drained, this is kind of what the topography would look like. And you can clearly see where, the deep underground ocean trenches are located. They all start from the north, they all kind of meander, wind around the Earth underneath the oceans. And you can line them up like exactly like the Mariana Trench, there's one that goes right around the Philippines. I mean, it's amazing once you
That is
imagine
so
what
cool.
things were like before the flood.
That is very cool. Yeah, I want to look at and start doing some of this where I look at the topography, like the land without all the overgrowth and some of the ancient structures that they're starting to show in the deeper, the oceans. And um, I think a lot of that is very cool, and that it can help us, what they call, the satellite imagery. Or, um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think the land, uh, the the one that's able to look through the ground penetrating radar and all that. There's a lot of stuff being discovered and
Oh, that would
found
be,
confirms this.
yeah, that would be a super interesting study then. I'm looking forward
Mhm.
to seeing your research on that and to going more into it myself. There's so much that's been hidden.
Yeah, there really has been, and but again, I see more and more coming out. And what we were talking about, again at the very beginning of the show, I just wanted to connect the ancient times, because the end from the beginning, it's all revealed within the scriptures. But we see that the ancient ones, the fallen angels and the giants, the progeny that were born unto them, the ones the same that the Nazis believed and said that they were of the Aryan races, and of the giants, the Ubermen, the Supermen. Um, that these connections are even in this day and age. That as Christ said, that they were the murderers of the prophets. That this is ongoing. They are still assassinating the people and the men of the Most High, the messengers, the prophets, um, and
Oh,
that war will be ongoing. Go ahead, Lisa.
yeah. Yes, yes. Sorry, they're like the modern day Pharisees, I guess you could say.
Right,
They're the ones behind the scenes, the shadow government or whatever you want to call it. But
right.
they're evil. They hate anyone who's speaking out for good. It's really just a repeat over and over and over.
Yeah, that was the really cool thing about the shows that I did with Tim too, is how he broke down and covered, the Pharisees and the leaven of the Pharisees, and tied together these bloodlines to the what we're contending with even now, the wheat and the tares and all of that. It's ongoing, and we're going to see more and more revealed with regard to the synagogue of Satan. Um, and unless you have this understanding, it's really just going to be difficult for people to make sense of what's going on in the world. If you exclude that there is a physical progeny, a bloodline dedicated to Satan and to evil, I mean, what? How do you make sense of the whole, parable of the wheat and the tare, the goat and the sheep, the harvest, the division, all of that? He said, let both grow together until the time of the end. And in the time of the end, he'd send out his angels as reapers to gather the tares for burning and the wheat for preservation.
Oh, yes, for sure. I mean, it makes so much more sense learning all this now than when I was like in Bible college or even Sunday school. That nobody could ever even explain that parable, the wheat and the tares. They would just say, "Oh yeah, that's the evil people, that's the good people," and nothing else. No history, no, and every parable that Messiah gave was there's definitely a history to it. There was things that they knew back then, so but the disciples, so they could line up everything and make sense. But even he had to speak in code because the Pharisees were so out to get him, and he did not want to give his pearls to swine at that point, I believe.
Yes, exactly. Thank you again, Tammy, for all that you've done and moderating. We appreciate you, sister. And thank you, everybody in the chat: Rick, Brian, Mark, Zarman, Truth Seeker, all those not in the immediate scroll. We appreciate all of you. We love all of you, and thank you for you know, taking the time to check out this information and for standing strong on the truth and sharing it with others because so many people just don't know how to explain what we are contending with the world. And the confusion is leading so many people astray. So it's nice to share insight and discernment. Thank you, Sassy. We appreciate all of you. But um, wanted to ask you, Lisa, what have you seen? What have you been studying that's been of interest? Anything intriguing over the last few weeks?
Well, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, there's that book series that I read. I think the last time I read through it by Dr. Rebecca Brown, the medical doctor. For those of you that are just
Yeah.
coming into the show, second hour, I was describing this at the beginning of the show, and it just really captured my attention back when I was in my early 20s, and I was researching here and there, and I didn't know about extra biblicals back then, and how wonderful that they are, and how much they help to open your eyes to clarify in the Bible. But I was interested to see what it meant to be a Satanist. Not that I was planning on doing so myself, but just to understand why things were so evil in the earth, and why it seemed the leadership especially as well. And this so that this book series, that's something that I've been reading through, going through, and just kind of reviewing. And now that I'm older and that I've seen more and seen how things have been progressing since the early 90s in our society and the media, the blatancy in the political realm even, and to just know that these are the kind of horrible things that they do behind the scenes to, I believe that it's all about the power, because when they perform these rituals, they receive more demonic power. They receive, it seems like maybe one-on-one instruction from fallen angels, just like they did back in the days of Jared. And it just it makes so much more sense now. Back then I thought, oh, these are just like isolated instances. All this can't be going on all the time underground, but it would make sense that it needs to be, because that's what their bloodline does. That's what their religion is. And so that's really been eye-opening to me too, and to make all these connections after teaching the Book of Enoch, reading through it numerous times, and along with all the other amazing extra biblicals that you've brought forth, Zen, and even the antediluvian books. I mean, the book of Og of Bashan, that King Og of Bashan, that was a real eye-opener, and the book of Lamech of Cain, like those two, when they came out and you introduced those online, I was all about it. I was buying those, and it really connects a lot of dots for me to know that there's these writings that are finally now available, released from the Vatican, that anybody can order and just read about what's going on. And some of it is fragmented, similar to what you're saying. Of course, we're just going to get fragments, but enough information in there to have a clearer picture of exactly what things were like before the flood in the days of Noah.
Yes. Yes. And I think, again, it's all very important for people to have this kind of a discernment. There was a question from Stephanie. She says, about the giant ancient tree stumps, are these the trees which were cut down by the fallen watchers? And why were they even bothering with cutting down trees anyways? That's a very good question. And actually, when you look at the verse in Isaiah, uh, hold on, let me pull up this passage and I'll
Okay, yeah,
see
it's
if
a
I can
very
bring
good question.
clarity to.
Oh yeah, excellent question, Stephanie.
Yes, in Isaiah chapter 14, it tells us there. Let me pull it up really quickly. There's a passage and it specifies Lucifer, Satan, as being the feller of these trees. I'm looking for the right verse, but
Okay. I was also thinking there's a passage in the book of First Enoch also that in one of the different translations, not the R.H. Charles, but it might be in the Lumpkin translation where it translates it as the giants are cutting down the trees. But I'm
right on. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, this one is from Isaiah chapter 14, and I'll start with verse 6. It says, "He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke, he that ruled the nations in anger is persecuted, and none hindereth. The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing. Yea, the fir trees rejoice at thee, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, Since thou art laid down, no feller is come up against us." So, these are the trees speaking about. And so, for whatever reason, Satan was just waging war. It talks about how, even the locust army and they were like a wilderness before and then great destruction thereafter. And so he just likes to destroy things. He just likes to kill, He's against life, everything that lives. Evil is live spelled backwards. So, um, yeah, really good question. But let me
Yeah.
give you a chance for final comment, Lisa.
Okay, yeah. If you want to look in the book of First Enoch, I believe it's chapter 61, where it says they shall labor at the trees. That's one of the different translations, and so that could be a reference to them cutting down the trees. I'm not sure. I think that's a great answer, Zen, that you gave. I'm not sure what the reason why they would be cutting down the trees before the flood, but they wanted to consume everything. Like they went from consuming animal meat and then work their way to human meat, kind of like what we were talking about the last time. And so their consumption, the destruction of everything good on earth, and I believe that would include the giant trees. And I love that verse that you shared from Isaiah 14, Zen, that really ties it together.
Yeah, I think so, and I had never really considered that until No Trees on Flat Earth. And then looking at all of that as like, it's undeniable, these are definitely tree stumps.
Yes. And we see it too. Hollywood puts out movies like Jack and the Beanstalk, where it shows this massive tree that extends into the heavens.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and so they have to put it out there in plain sight. I mean, maybe it gave them access to getting closer to the firmament. I'm not sure exactly what their purpose was for, but they must have been beautiful. They must have just been massive and creating homes for like the tree described in the book of Daniel, where it created homes for all the beasts of the earth, the animals, the birds, and I'm sure for humans too, kind of like we see in the movie Avatar, even with that massive tree that the blue people lived in. I don't know if you could call them people, but I mean, we see it. They like we were talking about earlier. They have to put it in plain sight somehow of even what the earth used to look like. The powers that be, the elite that run the media and run Hollywood, they have access to so much more information than we do. But part of their religion is to put it out there, right?
Right. Sassy says, I thought the giant trees were ordered to be cut down so the giants couldn't climb up to save themselves from the flood. That's an intriguing thought. And your thought about the firmament, too. Perhaps they used that in some of the construction to get access, to taller heights. We really won't be able to know until we're sitting before the Most High and able to ask all these questions, that are so intriguing to consider.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sassy, for all that you've contributed here in the chat. And to everyone else, it's so fun for me to look at the chat and see what everyone's talking about and you're commenting. Yeah. It is like a whole, like a very beautiful fellowship and community here on your channel, Zen. It's amazing.
Yes, and again, we thank and appreciate all of you But we are at the end. We'll see you tomorrow. Be blessed, all. Good night.
All right. Thank you, Zen. Good
Shalom.
night.
Thank you, Lisa. Be blessed. Good night,
You
all.
too.
Shalom.
Aloha.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus,
Thank you everybody for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.